Hi, I'm Alina May. I wrote the international bestseller Better Run. I'm known for really dark, messed up books, and it is my favorite thing to be here and share them with you.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I'm sitting down with Alina May. She's an author who writes some of my favorite Why Choose captive dark romance books. I first found Alina through her book Better Run, and as soon as I closed that book, I just thought I need so much more from this author. I immediately dove into her entire catalog, and I've eaten up every single book that she's ever written. So I am beyond thrilled that she's here with us today, and we're going to talk about her process, her inspiration, the genre of dark romance, and all of the things that make Alina May's books and characters so captivating. Alina, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Well, one of the first things that I noticed when I was doing my deep dive research on one of my favorite authors that I found was that you said in your bio you are first a reader and second an author. So, to open this episode, I would love it if you could share some of the books and authors that inspired you or motivated you to become a writer.
I've read for my whole life. It's been one of my favorite ways of escape and of learning about the world. And so, growing up in the 90s and 2000s, I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of TV. So books were my thing. So I read all kinds, but mostly historical fiction. But then as I kind of got older, I was like, oh, I want to write, that's what I want to do with my life. And the practical side of me was like, you can't do that. That's that's too hard. Nobody can do that. And so I got a degree in English with a concentration in creative writing. And that kind of burned me out for a while. I honestly did not want to pick up a book for a long time after that because it was 4 years of just heavy, intense reading and writing. So I took about a 5-year break, and then I don't know what bug got into me. I was like, I'm just going to read. And I Googled. I'm old, right? I'm an old person because I just Googled what to read instead of going to social media or anything. And at the time, ACOTAR was very popular. So I picked up that series and I was like, oh, books can be spicy. I didn't know. If you haven't read ACOTAR, there's kind of a captive prisoner, a little bit trope, low key, very low key. And I was like, ooh, I really like that. And so I kind of started just Googling captive books. And that started my really big rabbit hole into some really dark, really messed up romances. I was reading the Twist Me series by Anna Zaries, Once a Myth by Pepper Winters, a lot of really fucked up, for lack of a better term, captive stories. And I was like, I shouldn't like this, but I love it. And I just delved into as many books as I could get my hands on. And I was told by someone in my life, they're like, well, you should write. You loved to write. And I was like, nah, I'm just going to read. And so I read for a while. I read as many books as I could get my hands on until finally one day I was like, you know what? I'm ready to write. And that's where I started.
Oh, I love that. I actually need to look up some of those. I had not heard of some of the series you mentioned, so thank you. I love doing these
Yeah,
interviews because I feel like I just keep adding to my TBR, but
I know.
it's so much fun talking about books. So there's that inspiration to start writing, but then there's that leap into actually publishing a book. And
Yeah.
I would love for you to drop into that space and talk to us about that because I think so many people out there have a book inside of them or a book they've written that no one's ever going to see. So, what
Right.
helped you to cross that line?
So I've written a lot for my whole life, and I practice and I practice. And thank God, because some of the first books and things that I've written will never see the light of day. And that's a good thing because writing is a skill and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time, right? And so my first book, Better Run, was not the first book that I've written, but it was the first book that I published. And for me personally, I think everybody is a little bit different, but I was a mom of a 7-month-old and was essentially a single mom and was working full time. And so I was like, well, I want something for me, being a mom takes so much out of you. And then I was also working full time at a very traumatizing job. And I was like, no, 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 I want something for me. And almost nobody knew that I was publishing Better Run. I just did it for fun. I just like to try new things. And I was like, okay, cool. And I actively told like the 3 people in my life who knew what I was doing. I was like, I know I'm going to lose money. Please just keep your mouth shut and let me do this. Like, let me do it for fun for me. And it was so fun. And then it ended up going viral on social media and just kind of kickstarted my career. And I was like, oh, I can do this for a living. Like the dream that I've had since I was a kid can be a reality for me.
Oh, that's incredible. And I love that you
Yeah.
mentioned Better Run because Better Run was the first book of yours that I read, and I was
Oh,
immediately hooked. I mean,
oh,
I think I told you on our pre production call, I read it in one sitting, and I felt as if you were carving out this micro niche for yourself in your writing because then I did a deep dive on all of your other books. But I would love to talk about Better Run for a moment because as soon as I finished the story, my first thought was, oh, I'm not done with these characters. There is so much more to this story. I really sincerely hope she writes a second book because I felt like, yes, it's so well written. It's the perfect ending for those 3. And I just wanted to know what happens next when they finally cross this sort of line of honesty, vulnerability, intimacy. What happens then? Because I felt like the 3 of
right.
them had never really existed in that space. So
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about Better Run and my 3 little favorite characters who are just such troublemakers, each in their own way.
They are. So Better Run was my first published book. And so obviously you learn things as you go. But with Better Run, when I sat down to write it, my intention was just to write a book that was short, spicy, and fucked up. And there were 2 reasons for that. One, I was still like getting my sea legs, still trying to figure out how to write. And 2, like the relationship aspect was intimidating to me as a new author. I was like, okay, I'm the author. I can do whatever they want. I can make them kiss. I can make them like say they love each other, right? But I want the reader to believe it. Like I want it to come across as genuine. And when you get a book as fucked up and a story as fucked up as Better Run, it's not easy to just be like, okay, well now they love each other. Because that's not how those characters work. They're very traumatized people. They did a lot of horrible things to each other. And you can't just turn around and put a little bow on it and be like, "Mwah, you guys are lovers now." So I actually took a break after I wrote Better Run. I wrote Want to Play a Game to practice that very thing to be like, okay, so if I take all of these characters together who are really messed up, how do I create chemistry, real chemistry, because it's easy to write insta lust, right? Where they like each other because they're both hot characters. It's hard to write genuine attraction. So I really needed that time to kind of people watch, honestly, and to look at what makes people get into relationships. So it's like looking at the people around me like, okay, how did you fall in love? Why? What did that look like for you? And I found that a lot of it was like shared experiences and, the way that they grew up, they sensed home in each other. And so then I was like, okay, now I have to reproduce this in a book that is already published. I have to write a second book to Better Run when there's already a groundwork. The book is already out there. So it was an interesting experience with Better Hide, trying to lay some of that backstory so that you as the reader understand why Jaden and Cole and Mary Jo are good for each other other than they're just all hot. You know what I mean?
Oh, I love that. No, it was very much the experience as the reader. That was sort of the parallel for me. I was totally sucked into the first book and then thinking, but what happens when they get to that next layer? And in Better Hide, it very much was that. They had to learn to live together,
Mm-hmm.
truly live together, figure things out, escape certain circumstances. And it was interesting watching them build a life together
Yeah.
because when they're stepping out of fight or flight and saying, oh no,
Yes.
we're committed to doing this, that's a different skill set, right? And it seems like
It is.
they were learning together and they were being really gentle with each other,
which is not the nature of the relationship in the first book. They were being extremely gentle with each other as they're trying to figure out, like, how do we do this permanently? Oh, I just thought it was so beautiful. And what an incredible gift to have that second book. So I just want to say, as a reader, thank you very much. But my second thank you was to an author who's writing female characters that are so well rounded, have so much depth and color and texture. And what I notice in your writing, particularly with Mary Jo, but with a lot of other characters that you write, these women will survive no matter what. And it is something that just jumps off the page and connects with the reader on some deep level. Can we talk about that for a second? Yes, Mary Jo,
Yeah.
but a few of your other characters. What inspired you to write these women who are soft and strong and can be caring and affectionate, but they will outlive everyone? So, where does that come from as a writer?
I think it comes from my personal preference. Like it's what I like to read about. And that's because growing up, I was raised in a household where it was essentially that women were less than men. And I was told to my face that my dad was the head of the household with no other explanation other than because he was a man. That sat with me. And my graduation speech for high school was my old pastor telling me to go out and get married and have kids. And it felt like I, as a woman, was disappearing. My only job was to be there for the man. And I did not want that for myself. And so I created a life where that's not my reality. And I didn't want that for my characters. And so I want them to feel like real people because they are. And I think sometimes the female main characters disappear under the male main characters in books. And it's just not my personal taste because it reminds me of my childhood and not the life I chose for myself. So that's why I choose to write women who have agency, even in situations where they don't, right? Like in Better Run,
Mm-hmm.
Mary Jo does not have a lot of agency, but the tiny little bits of agency that she does have, she takes because she's a fighter, and that's what I love to read.
Thank you for sharing sort of your personal experiences. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people can resonate with that, but there's almost this programming not to talk about that and not talk about
Great.
sort of what we experience and the difference of what we want in our actual lives as we grow up. So I think it's a
Yeah.
really important topic, and watching the women in your stories hold so much power. Like you're saying, even in those positions when they're not, but they kind of are, was really exciting. And to have that be a theme throughout the books was just so wonderful. So, as a reader, I just want to say thank you. One other
Yeah.
thing from Better Run that I thought was really interesting is you address some really difficult topics. And actually, you address it in, I think, almost all of your books that I've read, things that can be really triggering or really hard to read about, but you're writing about them in such a way that, one, it feels safe as the reader to read about it. And then it also feels like you're approaching it with so much compassion. So, a few of the themes: mental health, trauma, abuse, even miscarriage, all of these things were addressed in your books. Let's talk about that. Like, what goes into inspiring you to touch on these topics, and then the way you approach them?
Yeah. A lot of it is personal experience. So writing is cheaper than therapy, I like to say. But therapy is very good. Don't get me wrong, it's very good. But I like to write to escape into a world where it's better, like I'm the author. Like I can make the book end the way that I want it to end. And I can give these characters all of this trauma, but I can also heal them from it. And I actually when I wrote Make Me, which is my most recent release, I actually went to therapy specifically to write that book. And I said, if my characters get a happy ending, then I want one too. So I approach it with compassion because a lot of it is me. And I'm just healing myself and telling a story as I go. And then if I happen to experience something that I'm writing about, I will often get a sensitivity reader. So somebody who has experienced it, because I want to tell the story with compassion. And I know these are like fiction. That's not a documentary or an article about having PTSD or anything else. But I do want to approach it with compassion. And also, like, my job is to make you feel like you're in the story. And if I get things wrong, so if I get an experience wrong and I don't write it correctly, then I'm yanking the reader out of the story. And suddenly I've stopped doing my job. Because as an author, I'm not selling you a book, I'm selling you an experience. And I want that experience to feel as real as possible for you. And I know not everybody's going to have the same experience with certain things, but I want to get to a point where a reader reads it and goes, if I was there, I would feel the same way. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And one of the things that came up in what you just said was, oh, it's fiction, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes I feel like there's almost a dismissal of fiction, storytelling, or certain genres without
Yeah.
the acknowledgement that for thousands of years, sharing stories was how we learned, how we healed, how we processed. And it's
Hmm.
only in like the last 100 years or so where that shifted into, oh no, it's going to be a one-on-one dynamic with you paying someone. And that has so much value. That's my background as well. I 100% honor that. But I also
Hmm.
think there's so much value in story. And you
Oh, yeah.
never know where that healing will come from, especially when it comes to trauma, which can
Yeah.
be really challenging to address sometimes in those clinical settings. And sometimes our aha moments come in those moments of sharing and storytelling where something comes up in conversation or it jumps off the page and you think, oh, me too. Oh,
Yeah.
I had that wicked, horrible thought as well. Or
Yeah.
I made that decision that I'm going to regret for the rest of my life. And I still have to be in relationship with these people. And I think it's so
Right.
beautiful when that can be addressed in a story. What has the response been from readers when you are addressing some of these really sensitive topics?
It feels like I'm just meeting a bunch of friends that I never knew I had, you know? Like, a lot of people will slide into my DMs and tell me that they've experienced XYZ from XYZ book, and it's just like you're not alone. Like, I promise you're not alone. And I think it's just especially hard, and at least here I'm in the United States, in this culture, it's very individualistic, and we've lost that community a little bit. And books are kind of the way to like gather that back again, like to learn from other people. And, sometimes too, I think some of us ideally should learn these things from our family, but that doesn't happen. And so it's kind of like creating a new family, a chosen found family within the book world where it's like, okay, well, you've experienced this too. Okay, so have I? And that's one of my favorite things in writing is to like give a voice to things that are often silent so that people know they're not alone.
Oh, I love that. Giving voice to things that are often silent. And I think that that stays with people much more so than some of that in your face type of approach. I feel like we really, in our bones, in our cells, we kind of connect with stories. And one of the other things that I've noticed in your writing is your characters are very human. They make mistakes. They make wild choices where you're like, what are you doing in this moment? And guess what?
Yeah,
That might seem fantastical on a page, but very often we're doing that in real life. People are very
yeah,
reactive. We're flawed. We're human. We're here to have a human experience. When you're writing about characters who make choices, make mistakes, harm themselves, harm others, and then are on a journey of redemption, whether they know it or not, and making
mm,
amends, whether they know it or not, I think that's really powerful. So, what is it
yeah,
like to write characters who are very flawed, who might have big feelings and don't know how to express them, or maybe control and aggression and assertiveness is the only way they know how to express desire or what they want or yearning for connection? Yeah, I would just love to drop into that space and
yeah.
your process and what you think about some of your characters who are on that journey.
Oh, they're fucked up for sure. But I love it, like that's That's what makes the bones of a good story, right? Is conflict. Your book is going to be so boring, honestly, if you don't allow for that conflict and allow for people to make mistakes. It's kind of talked about in the book world as a character arc. So if you think about it as like a graph where the character starts off in one place and you add the pressure, 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 and they escalate up, up, up. And then they go one of two ways. Either they implode and, no longer can operate and function at all, or they allow themselves to heal. And so I very intentionally create broken characters so that we can find that healing arc. Um, and I actually make them for each other to trigger each other on purpose because I want that tension and I want to see, them grow. And very often as I'm writing a book, I'll be texting my friends like, ugh, I got to put the pressure on this character, especially like Jaden, a Jaden type character.
Oh,
And I'm like,
yeah.
either they're going to break or they're going to change. And I was like, I need to, I need to break them. And I feel so bad doing it because I know how much it hurts the character and I know how much in real life that would hurt. But I've found that change in real humans doesn't happen unless you put pressure on. And so that's the whole like plot, I guess you could say, of my books is putting the pressure on to force them to change. And it's my favorite thing to orchestrate. Like I feel like an evil little villain in the background. Like, now what am I gonna do to fuck them up?
Oh, I love it. No, and one other thing that I'm also seeing in that process is it kind of pushes back against the societal idea that we have to fix ourselves in private so that we
Mhm,
can love publicly. And I
mhm.
am not a believer in that, and someone else might feel differently, but I think very often we heal in community. We heal with
Yeah.
witness. And that's another theme that comes up. These people are making mistakes in front of each other and then they're watching themselves fix it. So, that idea of relationships being so incredibly powerful and cathartic, right? We're almost
Mm.
processing some of the things inside of us in our dynamics and throwing it at that other person and seeing what comes back to us. What is that like in some of your books? Is there a book that stands out where you really pour that into the page and into the characters, that loving and healing in community?
Yeah, I kind of have to force it on a lot of my characters, right? Because they're very avoidant. A lot of my characters are avoidant characters, right? And that comes a lot from trauma. They don't want the community because they know deep down that it's gonna create vulnerability. And to a lot of my characters, vulnerability is danger until they meet their love interests and finally can come together. But for like Make Me in the most recent book that I wrote, all the characters begin very isolated and they're all kind of stuck in this trauma, stuck in alcoholism and stuck in PTSD in the past. And when they meet, there's a lot of forced proximity and external plots that bring them together. And they end up being able to find vulnerability, but it's hard and they fight each other about it. And they're definitely not happy about being forced to be vulnerable with each other, because that is terrifying for them. But when they do find it, it's like they found their family. And the people that they pick, the love interests, are very specifically picked and trusted. So it's not that they're necessarily having to find vulnerability with everybody, right? It's just with those
Oh, yeah.
people. Um, I'm a huge fan of like that found family and that found relationship. Vulnerability for them doesn't mean danger, it means safety.
It's so interesting too because safety can feel like a threat at times
Yeah.
when it's very new for you. And I'm
Mhm.
seeing that in some of your characters where it's this thing that in our heads, we know it's good. We know this person
Yeah.
cares about us. And that almost feels like acid on our skin
Yeah.
because it just almost reminds you of all the times you never had that. That's very real. That's very human because it would be great if every time we met someone who's wonderful to us, we're like, okay, that's perfect. That's great. I'm ready to show up. But that's really not how humans work. So I think
Right.
as a reader, I just really appreciate the humanity and the dimensionality you're bringing to characters. It makes the reader feel less alone. Like, oh, these
Yeah.
characters get to be on this journey. And, me as a person, I get to be on that journey as well. I don't have to be perfect in order to be
Right.
loved, in order to be accepted. And the other person doesn't have to be either. Like, we can show up together and be on this journey. So as a reader, I love reading about those things. And one other thing that I notice a lot in your writing is that, and in my own head, I'm thinking, if you have 800 pages, right,
Yeah.
to flesh out a story and all of these dynamics and dialogue and scenes, 800 pages gives you all the time in the world to do that. And it's still really challenging. But when you're writing a shorter book where the pacing is so rapid and these characters are almost under pressure, writing about these big feelings, right? The trauma, the intense emotion, the chemistry and connection between these characters, it's something that I'm watching you do in this really artistic way, and you're doing it in a much shorter book. So how are you able to do that? I feel like in my pre-production call, I almost said it's like that iceberg method where there's 10% above the surface and you feel these characters have 90% under the water and it's just like ready to explode. So
Yeah.
is that something you intentionally wanted to do, writing shorter or more fast-paced books? And how do you do that? Is that like an intense editing process? How do we get there?
Yeah. I do. I do write them shorter on purpose, and I specifically make my chapters short. But the way I start my process, and it's going to be different for everybody. So just because this works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. But I get to know my characters super, super, super well before I ever write the book. I want to know everything. I want to know their childhoods. I want to know if birthdays were missed. I want to know their favorite color. I want to know their favorite food. And even if that has nothing and it never comes into the story, I want to know everything so that I know what's important and I know what I need to hit on in the story and what makes these characters tick. And so I do create them for each other to push each other towards healing. And then I plot out typically just like on a basic level, like, okay, so where do I want my characters to be? So, like, if we're talking like want to play a game, where do I want my crazy unhinged character Sawyer to start and where do I want him to end? And so I have this basic idea of where I want them to be. And then I'm very intentional with the pacing that you talked about. I want every chapter to have a purpose, and I will typically know what each chapter is there for. So either we're advancing a character arc, so we're focusing on one character like Sawyer, and I'm going to give you his backstory, or I'm going to show you where he is right now and how he's reacting to Callie, or I'm going to advance some of the external plot. Personally, I don't care for a lot of external plot because I feel like unless it's pushing the characters towards growth, it can be a little bit boring in my opinion. I'd rather the characters be doing things instead of random things happening to the characters. If I don't have a purpose for the scene, I don't write it. I don't just sit down and be like, okay, well, in the timeline, the characters would be sitting in the living room together. And I'm like, no, no, no. Okay. So Sawyer's character arc is here. Now we need to switch over to Callie. We need to show how she's reacting to him. And then we advance them very specifically throughout the book. So it's all super intentional. I do it as short as possible. But that's also my genre. So I write dark romance thrillers. So I want to like give you the thriller quote unquote aspect of it, keep it short. I've also gotten a lot of feedback from readers who have like ADHD and they find that it's really easy to read my books because the chapters are so short. Kind of a little mind fuck, right? So if you get a book that's like 500 pages and it's only like 30 chapters, it feels long. But if it's like 100 chapters, like, okay, I read like 2 chapters today. Like, I'm doing great.
No, I completely agree. And I think that pacing is so important. And I love what you're saying about this and about the intentionality behind it and how it does appeal to a certain type of reader. So thank you so much for kind of sharing your process.
Yeah.
I definitely want to know, who is your favorite character that you have ever written?
Okay. Oh man, you're asking a why choose author to pick a favorite character.
Girl, I know what I'm doing. I really and I feel like I have fallen so in love with so many of your characters that I'm just like,
Yeah.
I always wonder, like, who is the character that's your baby? You know what I mean? In that way that you love them, you hate them, they drive you crazy, and you could write 5 books
Yeah.
about them.
Oh, man. Okay, so I do love a lot of my characters for a lot of different reasons. So none of my characters are like one for one myself, right? But I put a lot of myself into the characters. So when you're asking like which one's your favorite, I'm like, what do you mean? They're all me. But I really enjoyed writing Ronan in Make Me because he is just unhinged, full of trauma, and it's really fun to write a character that doesn't worry about what the world thinks. For me, anyway. And everybody else is going to have a different opinion because, everybody has a different lived experience. But I've lived so much of my life terrified of or trying to fit into norms of what the world thinks. And Ronan is out here just like, no, okay, the world doesn't operate the way I want it to. I'm going to kill pedophiles. So that's what's going to happen. And there's something fun and freeing about it. And he has this stuffed animal buffalo that he hallucinates talks to him. So it's really fun to like write a dynamic where there aren't really rules. You can just do what you want. But yeah, all of my characters have something very personal that I enjoy about them.
Oh,
I'm
I
curious,
can't.
what is your
Oh,
favorite?
well, that's so sweet. Thanks for asking. I feel like I'm always in the position of asking questions. I'm not used to being asked questions, if you can tell by how awkward that response was. Um, no, that's a good question. I I almost feel like Mary Jo. Just there were so many things about her that I was like, well, that's me. I mean, I would definitely do that. Or I just
Yeah.
thought it was that she was a survivor, but she was also really compassionate. I mean, at every turn, when you would think she should only care about herself, she was able to show up and just give a little extra to whoever was in front of her. And I also think yeah, there were just so many things about her that were really intriguing, really sucked me in. And then obviously that first book was so impactful in everything that happens to her and all of the decisions she makes. But then also the second book, where she really finds her voice, her strength, her power in this dynamic and builds this incredible life for herself. I
Yeah.
just loved her. And, it's so interesting because I resonated with so many of the characters in your books. And it is hard to pick one. So you could probably ask me tomorrow and I'll be like, well, I read Want to Play a Game and I feel da 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 da. I definitely, it's maybe a mood response, but I just thought she was written so beautifully that you just sucked me in and I was like, yeah, I resonate
Yeah.
with her a lot. So I don't know
It's
what
kind of
that
the
says about me, but I really enjoyed her. So thank you for asking. So Make Me was the one book of yours that I have on my TBR I have not read yet. So
Oh, sorry for
tell me.
talking about it.
No, no, no. I love it. I'm so excited. Tell us a little bit more about this book and a little bit about the dynamic between the characters for anyone who's in my position where they've read everything you've ever written and that's the next thing they're about to read.
Okay. So Make Me is a Why Choose dark romance thriller about 3 male main characters, and they all are pedophile hunters, essentially. 2 of them are people who freelance, kill on the side, and one is a police officer who is actually hunting the other 2 down. It's a pretty heavy book because we are talking about pedophiles, and these characters do have a lot of trauma. One of them has addiction, but it was fun to write because there's humor in it, right? Like, so one of my main characters is in psychosis because of his trauma and his heavy drinking, and that psychosis leads to him hearing his stuffed buffalo talk to him. And there's lightness that comes with a stuffed animal sidekick that talks to you throughout the story. It was so fun to write too because it's actually in a shared world with one of my best friends, Alexandra St. Pierre, and it was just so fun to write. Are you kidding? You get to write a book with your best friend. Like, her characters come in and like interact with my characters, and we would like be plotting things back and forth and have these little fake conversations through text and be like, well, my character says this. And then it was just so fun and healing. And hers is MM. And oh, it's just a fun series. I loved it.
Oh, I love that. I just had a content creator on here named Amy, and she was talking about that writer. And I was like, well, adding to
Yeah.
my list, like that's the next thing I'm
Yeah.
reading. So I
Oh
love
my God.
hearing about this, and I can't wait to kind of do my own deep dive.
You would love Alex's books. I really
Oh,
think you would. She
great.
really delves into like, oh man, she gets into the nitty-gritty and the characters are so, oh, I love them. Anyway, they're so good.
Well, she and I have a date this weekend then because I will be doing
Oh,
a deep dive and I can't wait to
yes,
read. So thank you for that suggestion. And thank you for
of
sharing
course.
that about the book and the characters. And for people who do love your writing and maybe listening to this episode, what direction are you going in next? Are you already writing a book? Are you just in the ideation phase? Where are you taking us in the next few years?
I have written a sixth book and I just sent that out yesterday. I'm not allowed to talk about it until I think I'll talk about it in the next few weeks, but it's gonna be good. And then of course I have three books rolling around in my head at the same time right now, so that's rather unfortunate because I can only write one at a time. But I will continue to write. Like this is my passion. I love this. I can't believe I get to do this as a job. And so I will continually be releasing books and up to all kinds of different shenanigans. I've got audiobooks and all kinds of things. So,
Oh, incredible. Well, if you couldn't tell, I'm excited. And I really do hope you'll come back and chat with us more as you're
cool.
publishing these books, because I would love to do further deep dives and sort of learn more about your process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alina, I would love to talk to you about the dark romance genre in general, because I feel like there's a lot of misinterpretation and maybe even some stigma to people who read it, people who write it. And I want to shine a little bit of a light on that because there's so many powerful and healing things. We've talked about the power of story and how helpful that can be. But the nature of trauma is that very often it's very out of control and it can blindside us and it can make us feel like we're in that almost hyper vigilant state. And books, I feel, can be really powerful because there's a start, there's an end. You have a sense of power and control where you can close the book or turn the Kindle off. And
Yeah.
we're watching, we're bearing witness to something happen, and we're not the person it's happening to, which for some of us, that can be such a relief. So, can you talk to us a little bit about this genre and maybe some of the misinterpretation and a little bit about the power of it and like what it can do?
I think when it comes to misunderstanding and some stigma, I think sometimes we lose track of the fact that everybody heals differently. And a coping mechanism for one person might not be the coping mechanism for another. And a lot of a lot of trauma survivors come to dark romance for healing. Now, that doesn't mean that dark romance is the only answer or that it's going to be the answer for everybody because it won't. And for some people, it will be re-triggering. But for people who do heal with this, there's a lot of consent. The act of reading is the act of consent. So even if what you're reading, the characters, there is no consent there, the act of reading is consent. And that's why I love this medium, right? Like it's not like movies or even audio, like it's an individual experience and you're consenting to it, or you can put it down if it's too much. And there's something to be said for the brain processing a situation that might be familiar to us, right? Where in real life, we didn't have control. But in the book, we can come to the genre, the dark romance genre specifically, knowing what the outcome is going to be, right? Like maybe we don't know the outcome for horror or the other genres, but we know in dark romance that the characters are going to get together and we know that there's going to be healing and redemption. And there's something so comforting, at least for me as a trauma survivor, coming to it and knowing what I can expect from it. I know we're going to get put through the ringer. I know it's going to maybe suck a few times, but there's healing. And they have this theory, and I'm not a scientist or a psychologist or anything, but there is a running theory that the reason we dream is to practice scenarios, right? So our brain will put us back in a scenario where we were before and try to figure it out and be like, okay, well, what could we learn from this? What's different? How can we reframe this? And I like to think that reading is very similar. It's the act of the brain being like, okay, we're back. how is this different? How is there any redemption in this? How can we take our control back in this situation? And like I said, that won't work for everybody, but it works for me and it works for a lot of readers. And it's probably my favorite thing about the genre.
Oh, it works for me too. And I'm so grateful. I feel like I've gotten that out of so many of your books. And I just really appreciate you being in this space and talking about this.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we chatted about on our pre production call is that sort of a basis of this podcast is the love letter aspect. And I always invite my guests to either read a love letter they've written to their younger selves or to their readers. So, I'm hoping that you can share one with us today.
I do. I have one. Okay. Dear reader, these books are dark. I don't pretend like the world is all sunshine and rainbows because for a lot of us, it's mostly nightmares and fear. These stories and these characters will never shy away from that because you deserve to know that even in the darkness, you won't be alone. My characters see you, your fellow readers see you, and I see you. You are loved and worthy no matter how comfortable the fucked up darkness makes you feel. Because guess what? It makes me feel right at home too. Dear reader, I see you. I write these for you. Love, Alina.
Oh, Alina, thank you so much. That was so beautiful. And as your reader, maybe I needed to hear that today. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Of course.
So, Alina, where can people find you and find your books? Where are you on the internet?
My books are on Amazon, so you can stalk me there. I have ebooks, paperbacks, audiobooks, whatever you like. And then if you like to stalk, I am also on social media. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. You can just find me at Alina May Author. I have a lot of fun on there and I post a lot of book recs too. So if you like my books and are interested in books that are similar, I just yap about what I'm reading. So you can find me there.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'll make sure to put all of those links in our show notes because I know I'll be in that space as well. You already gave me so many good recommendations. I feel like I need to pick your brain a little bit more, but thank you so much for being here. I really hope you come back and join us soon.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandmixtapes@gmail.com.